The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Yes, that's right, folks. It's that time once again where we go into the world of a Bogie film, my favorite on screen actor. And this was one that kind of checks a lot of different boxes for us, too. It gets us another Western, which is not a genre we've talked a lot about on Movie Tales. It gets us a John Huston, which I don't remember the last one we did. I feel we did one already. I can't remember which one it was, but Houston's back on the menu. Let's talk about it. And this would be Bogie film number 4, because we did Casablanca, obviously, The Barefoot Contessa, and Sabrina. So I think this is the 4th Bogie we're talking about. And drastically different than the other ones we've talked about with this guy. Humphrey Bogart goes all in this movie in a way we haven't really seen him do yet if you've been following the stuff we've talked about. He's playing a little stinker, kind of a guy that kind of encapsulates a very specific era of America and how we are greedy and selfish and destroy ourselves at the turn of actually helping others. This movie's about the American dream. Finding gold in a mountain and then turning on everyone around you because you can't control your lust for power and desire. And if that's not relatable, what is? So it's based on a popular book. I think a lot of the films of this time were, and this one's just, we say it all the time, and I mean it every time I say it. We don't make things like this anymore. I think there's a lot that comes out of this film that people take for granted now, which is kind of like the descent into madness, the three-hander lead of people going against each other, and kind of like the idea of a classic shootout. Yes, there have been shootouts there before, and there's probably better ones from before this movie came out, but I just think the idea of getting a bunch of guys who are sweaty and dirty, putting them in a forest or just a desert and say, shoot some guns, that's the most Hollywood thing you can do. And aside from when we did Red River, we haven't really covered those yet, so I'm glad this is where we're going to be covering them. I love Bogie. He plays a guy called Frank Dobbs in this movie. I think he's in Topeka in Mexico, and he's just a down-on-his-luck guy trying to make a few bucks. Looks greasy and slimy. It's so interesting how Bogie became a movie star, because he looks insane. He looks like a snake, like just a leathery skinned creature. And then when you put a beard on him, it looks less satisfying. Like the guy needed to be clean shaven to be taken seriously. But he is just doing what he can for money, begging for money, just drinking and gambling and yelling at children. And he signs up to work for this guy. Eventually, he makes friends with this man called Curtin, who is played by Tim Holt. And they sign up to work on like an oil thing for this guy named McCormick. And they learn after a while that McCormick isn't actually going to pay them for their services. So they were duped. And it eventually leads to them beating the guy up in a tavern and stealing his money. Well, stealing the money. It's the money that's owed to you so they can actually have enough to set off on their next endeavor. And what is their next endeavor going to be? Well, these two guys, well, they're just like, down on their luck, living in the poorest slums that you can imagine. They run into an old timer named Howard, and Howard is played by Walter Houston. And he says, you know what's out there, boys? Out in those big mountains in the Sierra Madre, there is gold in them here hills. We should go collect it. That's not Howard's idea. It's actually Dobbs' idea to go collect the gold. They just got to get enough money to get out there, get the resources they need, and then we're going to go pan for gold. Which is surprisingly something I know a little bit about. My father watches all of those like gold rush shows, so every time I encounter him and we meet up and he's watching TV, one of those shows are on. And I'm just like, oh, I know what a slough is. I know how you pan for gold. I know the different types of weight and styles for it. So to see an early example of that from a 40s movie set in the 1800s, I'm like, okay, I guess the style really hasn't changed, has it? We're still doing this a very specific way. What I find very interesting, and I think this is kind of a thing that the Western genre does more than any other, especially in this era, is it lets the guys be kind of gross. And I think that's very accurate to the time period. We'll kind of get to like the stereotypes of some of the Mexican people in a bit here. But all of the leads have scruff on their face. They're not presented to look beautiful. This was an era in Hollywood when if men weren't properly groomed, they looked weird. Every movie star was clean shaven unless they had like the Clark Gable mustache, Nobody looked weird. But all three of these guys, whether it is Bogie or Holt or Houston, they all have various degrees of beards on them. Some of them, it looks natural. You know, Walter Houston's a guy who's really old. Probably not as old as you imagine, because in the 40s people age differently. But he looks rough, and he's like an old prospector. He's got to look a little bit crazy. Curtin, Tim Holt, now that's a rounder face, so it works better. I will never get comfortable seeing Bogie with a beard. It just always seems off and different. Nonetheless, these guys decide they're going to work together, and they pan for their gold. It takes them a couple months to actually get everything set up to do it. They eventually do it. They build their slough. They get everything going in place. And by the end of like the actual story part where they're, panning for the gold, they come out with about $100,000 worth of gold, and they're gonna divide it evenly amongst the men. But this starts the first area of conflict, because Bogie's character believes he should get more because he put the most money into this thing, because he won a gambling thing earlier which got them the resources to build their slough and get involved in this. So he thinks he's entitled to more. Thus starts the downfall of Frank Dobbs, where throughout the rest of the movie, this guy's going to slowly go insane thinking everyone's going against them. And that's for the rest of this movie. The rest of this movie is this pseudo-paranoia thriller about these three guys who know they have a lot of money on their hands, and they're going to try to figure out if they can trust one another, if someone's going to kill each other in the night and steal the money and run away. How do you go about doing that? Is there any proper way to have this business? If you hide your steak under a rock and a lizard crawls under it, are people suddenly going to say there's no lizard so they can get your money, or are they actually going to help you keep the lizard away? It's just so intense, and a really good portrait of this era, which is trust no one, everything's evil, greed is good, power is good to have, own it, and you'll come out on top. But it's the story of the American dream, and not everyone's going to succeed, so we'll get to that in a minute here. There's a couple of villains throughout the piece, the main one being a bandit named Gold Hat. He is like the leader of like this group that terrorizes the like neighboring communities, and they have their guns, and they are going to do their best to steal from everybody and, literally take the clothes off your back so you have nothing left in you. And it's really hard to talk about some of these films without discussing the way they portray certain characters. Now, what I think is very interesting is there are extended sequences where there is characters speaking in Spanish, and we don't feel the need to do subtitles for it. Now, maybe that is just where I watched this. I watched a version of it that was playing on TCM I recorded. So maybe it's just that version didn't have the subtitles, but I think it's kind of brave to have you just read the body language as opposed to get the minute details of what these guys are saying. It's kind of clever, just they're evil, they're doing stuff, they're betraying people, they're trying to sell these wares that they stole. You get the big picture. He's got a big sombrero, we're going to blow a hole in it when they try to steal our gold. It's pretty good stuff. There's also another American that shows up, and his name is Cody. And Cody stumbles into Curtin one time when he goes to town and realizes there's another American here. If there's an American here in them here hills, that must mean he is panning for gold, and he might have some. So Cody's smart enough to realize, I gotta follow this guy and see what's up there. It turns into a standoff where the guys are like, okay, we can do a couple things here with Cody. We can let him go on his way, act like he saw nothing. He could come back with more men or, the police and kill us and steal it anyways. We could kill him and hope nobody comes looking for him. Or we could have him join our group and then split it 4 ways. Nobody wants to do that, so that's what's going to happen now. And that turns into a standoff against Gold Hat and his people, which leads to Cody dying, so that problem's resolved pretty easily. And then it's just another three-hander of these guys slowly losing their minds. In particular, it is Humphrey Bogart losing his mind, which is so fun to see. Every movie we've talked about with him thus far on this channel, he has been cold and collected and in control of every situation. He goes for it in this movie in ways that I'm so happy to see, because I think he has such a specific aura about him that is very uncomfortable, and he feels like he's not happy being around, and to see that slowly descend into madness is so fun to watch. He has big eyes, he's covered in dirt, he's got a bushy beard, and he looks crazy. And it's just very satisfying to see that guy fall that hard down this rabbit hole. Oh, it's so interesting. I love the performance that everyone else is giving too. Tim Holt has kind of like the toughest act. We don't really get into like the age specification of some people. Now, he's not as young as Montgomery Clift was when we did Red River, but he's kind of in like the younger area, calling people old timer or the old man or saying yes sir to certain things. But he looks older than me, so he's got to at least be in his 30s, which maybe the character's supposed to be 18. You can never really tell with these people because everyone looks insane and they're all dusty and old. But I think he does a great job. Same with Walter Houston. Just the perfect voice, the perfect energy, very capable with a gun and comfortable. And that leads to a really interesting scene that I found to be so fascinating in this movie. Is there is a local village nearby in these mountains, and they know that Howard can helpfully help them get a couple bit of medicine to help like a sick kid. There's this really fascinating sequence with Howard where he goes into the village and he's doing all of these different tricks to get this kid to wake up. They think the kid is dying. He's rubbing alcohol on his nose. He's moving his arms in a certain way. He's trying to like light him out with a match and stuff like that to get him to actually physically wake up. And the entire village is surrounding him and watching him. And when the kid finally wakes up, the whole village is like, oh, so this guy needs to stay with us because he can help us. And you watch this old white guy descend into like this huge ensemble of people just slowly walk away as they all just like part for him to like get through. It is so weird to watch and incredibly interesting. It's such a specific moment, and it might go into like the, oh, these are backwoods savages, they don't know anything about modern medicine. It doesn't really lean into that. I mean, it's just, I think it's more of like a common thing of just the idea of America and the colonization aspect, or just like the industrial revolution aspect of we're going to go to a place, have the better weapons, have the better drinks, have the better identity, and take shit over. And that's kind of what this is supposed to emulate. Like, this is a guy who knows how to save people in a way that maybe these other Spanish people don't. So that's really interesting. That eventually leads to, because when he's doing that thing, the village calls him away to do like other stuff. So we see that Dobbs and Curtin are going to have to like protect his share of their gold. And this is going to help creep the dissent in Dobbs that he has to kill Curtin. They get into a fight. Over the course of the movie, Dobbs is slowly talking to himself, talking to the donkey, trying to understand his situation. And it eventually leads to him shooting Curtin. Doesn't kill him. He thinks he kills him. But man, it's just so fun to see Bogie in all dark, this shadowy figure luring over this guy. And just being like, have I done the right thing? Was this the right thing to do? Is everyone against me? He loads up all their equipment and all the donkeys, takes all their stuff, and he hauls ass out of there, literally. And he's going to go get his earnings. He's going to go make some money off the gold he found. And he's going to keep it all for himself. Forget the rest of them. They all betrayed me. I have everything I need right here. I'm going to be the one who walks away victorious. What he doesn't realize is that he didn't actually kill Curtin. And he even threw a gun down to Curtin. Like, yeah, well, it's your gun. You should keep it. Not realizing that he didn't kill this guy. And it's very interesting. It is probably the most disturbing version of Bogie that we've talked about. And I'm trying to find what is the comparison you can make. There's like obviously the Audrey Hepburn doing the Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's, but I think a more accurate one might be someone who could be considered like the 80s and 90s equivalent of Humphrey Bogart, which is Harrison Ford doing The Mosquito Coast. We are taking the star persona, this ragtag guy who's really handsome and dashing and has a snarky attitude, and throwing him into a different location where he's a complete and utter despicable guy, a mess who is killing people and doesn't deserve to live. He becomes the villain by the end of the piece, and I think that's probably a big influence on Mosquito Coast, is watching something like this. It's such an interesting way to end this story, where we don't actually see Bogie interact with the other guys again. They're both still alive. Eventually Curtin makes his way to Howard, and they're going to like go into town and see if they can figure out what Dobbs did with their money. It's such an interesting way to end this because the bandits return and they attack Dobbs and they kill him And he, like when he stops to drink some water from like a really dirty puddle, they kill him and he just dies and he's out of the movie now. Like we killed Humphrey Bogart, the star of this movie, just died unceremoniously from these bandits who raid his entire like collective of donkeys. They'd only take the pelts because that's what they could sell. They disregard all of the gold which is in their sand and just dump it down into the ground and like stomp over it because there's nothing there. It's just dirt to them. It doesn't matter what this stuff is. They don't know. So the whole point just becomes meaningless. The whole journey these guys went on, their descent into madness and destruction and hating each other and what is the real value of life, it just falls apart because these guys just want to make a quick buck, not knowing they had even more money at their disposal. And America. It's dumb to say that. It's kind of just, getting the quick buck. What do we learn here? Did anybody learn anything? Not really. Maybe Curtin learned something, not to like work with assholes, or like he's still young enough to find a new part of his life that he can live in and be a part of. Maybe that's it. I guess Howard learned like he could live here and find himself like a nice Mexican wife and settle down or whatever. But nobody gets the money. Everyone just kind of like dies. And they decide just to move on with their lives. Like, what did we do? What did we accomplish? Did anything really happen? We went through all this trouble, all this hardship, and for what? Nobody walks away with anything, and we all fell apart in our lives. And hey, at least you got to see Humphrey Bogart go crazy. And he goes crazy. There are some moments where this guy is losing it in a way that I'm very impressed to see. He's very composed on screen and off screen, so it's really fun when he gets to break free and actually try something. I dig it a lot. This movie's very interesting, and it looks gorgeous. Like, we're shooting on real locations in the mountains. Of course we are. A lot of, like, actors in costumes and horseback and everything. It is really big and special, and it kind of just defines a specific type of movie, which is maybe the person we're watching go on this journey isn't actually the good guy. I don't know if it's, like, the first example of that. I don't imagine it would be. But just to wholeheartedly be like, no, the top billed actor is actually going to be the antagonist to everybody, and we're watching a guy lose his mind. It's not something you see a lot of in this time period. And stereotypes aside, and depiction of cultures aside, it holds up incredibly well, and it looks really fascinating. And it's pretty accurate depiction. I think gold mining at the time, building like a small shaft where you can get in with your pickaxe, having the slough built to like separate everything. I don't really know how that works still, but I guess that makes sense. Looks cool. I don't know. I really dig the vibes that this one's giving off. Well, it's probably out of every Bogart movie we've talked about, the one I like the least. That's not to say this isn't a masterpiece, because I think it's going to show you a lot of the tropes you've come to know later on. And a lot of that's just like, can you trust the person? Can you trust another person who's doing the same thing as you? Or can they betray you at any moment? And that is a huge theme throughout media and cinema. And a lot of it comes from this classic Western. So it's a really fun story. And I recommend everyone watch it. Treasure of the Sierra Madre. It celebrated its 75th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, recently. And it's well worth it. Very fun. So that's going to do it for this episode of Dynamic Tales. Thank you all for watching this video, and be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun, stay safe, good luck.